A lot of people have a strong fear of needles. Many even have a fear of strangers. How do you feel about the thought of a stranger injecting you with a certain substance he made himself while you're out minding your own business in public? Let's take a trip out to Maryland, our first venture to this state, if memory serves me right. In this state, we have a particularly shady-looking 51-year-old man named Thomas Bryan Stemen. While later records show that he actually lived in a home that he owned out in Toledo, Ohio, he had been residing in the Churchton area in Maryland for several years. Thomas has had somewhat of a rocky past when it comes to his criminal record. Back in 1999, he had a warrant out for his arrest, deeming him a fugitive from justice, according to some Maryland court records found online. In nearby Anne Arundel County, he also has pending charges related to DV. His negative treatment towards women does not end at that charge. In fact, it gets worse, to a disturbing degree, to say the least. You see, Thomas was producing a concoction he made himself. He put his witch's brew into a couple of syringes, preparing for what was to come. Our story takes place on February 18th of 2020, at a grocery store, of all places. Christopher's Fine Foods, out on the 5500 block of Shadyside Drive in Edgewater, to be exact. Thomas came into the parking lot with a scheme. A nonsensical scheme that, to this day, nobody seems to really understand. He wandered the parking lot, looking for a woman, syringe in hand. On his quest, he came across a couple of women. He stalked the first woman for a while, aiming to stab her with the syringe, but he was unable to catch up with her and unable to get a good shot. Not discouraged in the least, he set out to find another. He came across an unsuspecting 17-year-old girl. The girl ran into Thomas. Feigning kindness, he told her to go on ahead of him and let her pass. When she was a few steps ahead of him, he pulled his weapon out of his hoodie pocket. Thankfully, he didn't make the complete stab and only sprayed a little bit of the contents of the syringe on the back of her leg. She later noticed the wet spot, likely very confused, but simply wiped it off and ultimately ignored it for the time being. Thomas, failing twice in a row, still didn't give up. He still had more of his special blend to distribute. This is when a woman named Katie Peters makes her appearance. Katie had just finished up her shopping at the grocery store and loaded her goods into the car. Being a good citizen, she was in the middle of bringing her cart back to the store when Thomas crossed her path.
I had already gone shopping. I was putting my cart back like a good citizen.
So you had your cart.
Had my cart, so I didn't hear anybody behind me because of the cart noise. So I'm walking in, people come out, very close, tight quarters, right? And I walk in and I put my cart back, and I don't know, I felt something. I didn't see anybody, hear anybody. I felt something, and I knocked whatever was behind me.
At around 7 p.m., Thomas followed Katie into the store. With his hands in his pockets, he tried to look as natural and nonchalant as possible. But naturally, carrying a syringe around with the intent of assaulting someone is something that's a bit hard to hide. He looked suspicious. However, Katie just wanted to return her cart and get home, so she more or less ignored him. Then, when her back was turned towards him, Thomas whipped out his gooey dagger and plunged it into her backside as quickly and stealthily as he could. Katie jumped in recoil, most likely a natural reaction to being stabbed in the ass. Before she could see it, Thomas returned the syringe into his pocket. Katie asked Thomas if he just burned her with a cigarette or something. He responded with, "Yeah, it felt like a bee sting, didn't it?" She left to go back to her car, but Thomas oddly followed her. She cursed at him until he left. She hopped in her car and decided to drive home, hoping this incident would turn out to be nothing. But, in the car, she started feeling extremely sick. She called her son in a bit of a panic, saying, "I started driving home and it started hurting really bad. Something's not right. I hope nothing happens. I hope I make it home." When she got home, she examined herself a little more closely and found that her pants were completely undamaged. If a cigarette had burned her, it would have burned through the pants, or so she thought. It was then that she realized she had been pierced with some sort of needle. She noted that there was some sort of wet substance around it as well. Overnight, the small red dot that was the injection site became a large red circle about 4 inches in diameter. So she decided enough was enough and went on to go to the hospital. Before that, however, she made a phone call in to the Anne Arundel Police Department and filled them in on everything that had been going on. She went on to Anne Arundel Medical Center to seek some sort of treatment for her problem. The police agreed that it very well may have been a syringe that stabbed her and that they wouldn't rule it out. Given that the medical staff had absolutely no idea what Katie had been injected with, they decided to put her on a preventative medication cocktail for 30 to 60 days, hopefully long enough for police to find the man and find out what was in the syringe. Katie commented, "I have no clue what was in that needle. It could be rat poison, HIV, trucks. I don't know what's in that needle." And no, I didn't make a mistake. The article says trucks. That must have been a gigantic needle. For about a week, Katie had no idea what Thomas had injected her with. It could have been anything. I mean, probably not a truck, but we can't completely rule it out at this point. Police proceeded by getting the surveillance footage from the grocery store. The store gladly handed it over and they quickly got to work on reviewing it. In the video, they saw a white male hobble up behind the victim, pull something out of his pocket, and plunge it towards her. While requesting additional footage, they also came across the parking lot footage, which showed the same hooded man trying to stab 2 other women as well. But they too, unfortunately, had no idea who the man was and had no way to identify him. The Anne Arundel County Police ended up going to the public to plead for any information they may have that could identify the man in the footage. They made the video public and most local news channels covered it. Fairly quickly, just a few days later on the 25th, an anonymous tipster called the police department and identified the man as Thomas Stemen. The police tracked him down and swiftly arrested him. He was held without bond as they still didn't really know the extent of what he had even done. Depending on what was in that syringe, the charges could vary wildly. Thomas Stemen was charged with 3 first-degree assault charges, 1 for Katie and 2 for the attempts on the other victims, second-degree assault, and reckless endangerment. The judge assigned to this case called the injections absolutely bizarre and disgusting. There was an order made to keep Thomas in jail for the time being. They were pushing to charge him with 11 other charges as well, such as carrying a dangerous weapon with the intent to injure. But their status was up in the air as they remained pending for quite some time. Thomas was to remain in the Anne Arundel County Jail until they could track down the syringes and finally figure out what he was injecting into people. The police easily obtained a search warrant. First, they checked out Thomas's car. They quickly found a hypodermic syringe in the driver's side door. It still contained what the police described as a cloudy liquid. They got a warrant for his house as well and set out to search it, and I assume that you can imagine what they found. Upon examining his Churchton home, they found another syringe with that good old cloudy liquid on top of the shelf in his medicine cabinet. They also found 9 other currently empty syringes scattered all around the house and hidden in places like kitchen cabinets and the nightstand by his bed. Most of those syringes didn't have needles, but still. Police found the clothing that Thomas had been wearing in the video conveniently hanging on the bathroom door. All of the syringes were gathered up and sent off to the crime lab for DNA analysis. The police were pretty quickly able to get a search warrant for Thomas Stemen's DNA as well, making things a lot easier. The results from the syringe that they found on the inside of the car door came back first, identifying the liquid as... come on, you saw the title. It was, Stemen. You can't make this shit up. And that particular dose of man butter was a match to Thomas Stemen's DNA. The pants he wore that day were also splattered with the same baby gravy. Detectives immediately worried that there may have been other victims. This man had quite a few syringes on hand, a few of them locked and loaded. Seeing that he so easily tried to stab multiple victims at the grocery store, that caused them to worry that this was somewhat of a hobby for him. For the time being, there was no way to know. Evidence was piled up against Thomas Stemen. His back was up against the wall and he knew it. But despite all of the evidence, he denied the accusations up and down. This is where the Alford plea comes in. The Alford plea is a plea that allows a defendant to plead guilty without admitting fault in a case. It's a little confusing, but basically it allows him to maintain that he is innocent, but also accept that the state has more than enough evidence to convict him. He entered an Alford plea to both the first and second degree charges against him. Because of this plea, Thomas's case would not go on to trial. Instead, all he would do was accept the consequences of the crime without actually admitting to the crime. Police officials brought up the fact that he had also tried to assault 2 other women in the parking lot. As a consequence of this, Thomas also pled guilty to second-degree assault for his lunging towards the girl and getting her outfit wet in the parking lot. She was otherwise not harmed, but yeah. 10 months after entering the plea, the judge presiding over the case, Stacy McCormick, sentenced Thomas Stemen to 10 years in prison. After he gets released, possibly when he's in his 60s, he'll have an additional 5 years of supervised probation. He'll also have to go through both a substance abuse and mental health evaluation upon his release, and is required to attend ongoing treatment. Oh, and he's banned from the grocery store now. The state's attorney, Ann Colt Leadis, said, "The defendant's actions were truly horrific. He intentionally went into our community with the goal of assaulting unsuspecting women. With this sentence, he will be removed from our community for a long time. I am thankful for the citizens who identified him from the video released by law enforcement and that the survivors are able to move forward after this senseless assault." The detectives still firmly believe that there may be other victims out there who simply chose not to report anything to the police. The police sergeant went on to say, "If you've seen this video, it's very aggressive, it's very deliberate, and that makes us think it's not his first time doing this." Once again, thank you so much for watching my video. If you want to give it a like, it really helps it get seen by other people. And if you like dark content like this, please feel free to subscribe. That's what I do. If you really want to support the channel even farther, I do have a Patreon account. Speaking of which, a shout out to my top patrons: Lonro, Itaya, Jewel Mavchan, Lori Tayaba, Kim Peak, Lux Alpaca, Charity, Skooky Main, Foxlicity, Jackie, Lavender Wise, and Tracer Ferguson. You guys are, as always, the best. Thank you, have a good night. I'll see you on Halloween.